This week on Engage the Sage.
Hi everyone, I'm Don Saucier. Welcome to this week's episode of Engage the Sage. This week, I'm going to talk to you about some things to keep in mind while you're teaching this semester. Our semester has just started. I am super excited for all the wonderful things my students and I are going to learn together this semester. But I'm also a little nervous and overwhelmed about the start of the semester and the fact that we're going to have 4 months of time together, and I get nervous every time I walk into class. There's a couple things that make me nervous. Part of it is I want to do a really good class for my students. I want them to have a good experience. I want them to learn a lot. I also want to have a great experience myself. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the things that I keep in mind to make that experience as good for me and my students over the course of the semester as I can. As I'm experiencing the simultaneous excitement and anxiety, this is something we call excite nerve. You're going to have both. I'm going to have both when I walk into class. And what I do is I try to keep some things in mind to help me focus on the excitement, not on the nervousness. The first thing that I try to keep in mind to make the experiences for myself and for my students as positive as they can be is to make sure that my course is going to be manageable. I want to make sure that the expectations I have for myself and for my students are going to be realistic for what my course is supposed to do. It's going to be realistic for the topic of the course. It's going to be realistic for where that course is in the curriculum, the level of the course, the number of credits for that course. I want to make sure that I can do that course in a realistic way, and my students can too. I think it is very easy sometimes to try to do too much in a course, and I try to keep in my mind to keep that course manageable, so I do what the course is supposed to do and not fill it too much so that my students can't learn all the stuff I want them to over the course of that semester. I've talked before about the concept of teaching less better, to make sure that you're focusing more on the depth of more important content rather than having lots and lots of things that don't need to be there. So keeping that course streamlined and manageable is going to have a great benefit both for the learning and the experience of the people in that course. If that course stays manageable, it's also going to be more sustainable. I like to think about keeping excellent teaching sustainable. So it's not a heroic effort that you could never replicate, but you're going to do excellence in a way that you can repeat semester after semester. The next thing that I want to keep in mind when I'm teaching this semester is to make sure the experience is positive, both for me and for my students. So to keep the experience for myself and my students positive, I'm going to employ the empathetic course design perspective. I'm going to try to be aware of all of the things that my students are bringing into that class in terms of their thoughts, their feelings, their goals, their expectations. And I'm going to try to set up my course in a way that is empathetic to those personal, professional needs and goals. I'm going to try to make my course positive by giving my students opportunities to personalize the information and to apply it in ways that are going to be meaningful for them. This is going to come through discussion topics. This is going to come through personalized assignments where they have the opportunity to actually create their own imprint on their learning. I'm also going to try to make this experience positive for me by infusing the class with content and assignments that I find valuable and exciting. I'm going to try to engage myself in my class by putting things I'm going to be engaged in into it. As I've talked about many times before, as I get more engaged, that engagement is going to trickle down to my students so they're more engaged and they're going to learn better. So this is something I'm going to try to keep in mind to do so by design and intention throughout my teaching. The third thing I'm going to try to keep in mind to make sure this experience is going to go awesome is to understand that this is not the only thing in my life, and this class is not the only thing in my students' lives. My class is a priority for me. I expect my class to be a priority for my students, but I understand this is going to be one of many priorities that they are focusing on this semester. So I'm going to recognize and acknowledge the challenges that I'm facing outside of my course and the challenges that my students are facing outside of my course. And I'm going to try to give myself grace for those things and my students as well. The fourth thing I'm going to try to keep in mind to make this semester awesome, and this is something I think some of us need to hear, is I'm going to assume that my students are trying their best. Far too often, and I've been guilty of this myself, but far too often, you'll hear instructors and teachers talking about these dang students and complaining about the things that the students are or are not doing. And they'll potentially speculate that maybe their students are not trying in their classes or treating them seriously. What I'm going to try to do is give my students the benefit of the doubt that among the many responsibilities and priorities that they have, that they are trying their best in my class based on what they have available in terms of their personal bandwidth. I'm going to assume that they signed up for my class and they paid tuition for my class because they want to learn and they want to do well. I'm going to give them that assumption and that benefit of the doubt, and hopefully they'll do the same for me. One of my colleagues once told me, and I think it bears repeating, is that it's a lot easier to be happy if you assume other people are trying their best. And the last thing that I'm going to try to keep in mind this semester to make my teaching go great is I'm going to assume that I got this. I'm going to assume that this semester is going to go well. It doesn't mean I'm not going to have a challenge. It doesn't mean that a crisis isn't going to come up that I'm going to have to deal with. But I'm going to assume that I'm going to get through whatever comes up. When I go in with that degree of self-efficacy, this degree of confidence, that teaching is going to go well, it allows me to enjoy it more. It allows me to see that classroom as an oasis away from all of my other personal and professional responsibilities. So I'm going to think that I got this, and I want you to think that you got this too. I'm recording this video at the beginning of the semester where it's really important that I keep these things in mind so I can have a really optimistic perspective on the semester that's about to come up. But I also try to remind myself of these things periodically throughout the semester whenever I'm teaching. I think if you keep these things in mind, and if I keep these things in mind, we're going to have better experiences as teachers, and our students are going to have better experiences in our classes. In the comments below, I would love to hear what you keep in mind to create great experiences for yourself and for your students when you're teaching this semester. Thank you for watching this episode of Engage the Sage. Please like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, share us on social media, and we'll see you next time on Engage the Sage.